host. A dark world where people must learn to face the monsters in their closet. Fear is in control here. Embrace that which makes you scream and steal away the bliss of sleep. Your inner demons have a voice. Hear. Allow them their moment in the dark. Welcome to Night Terrors, where we are all united in our fear. With your host, Donald Allen Kirch.
Well, good evening and welcome to Night Terrors. I am author and paranormal investigator Donald Allen Kirch. Night Terrors is a show dedicated to those individuals who have trouble sleeping at night, who battle the demons and puzzles that ordinary people cannot see. Tonight, we have with us an individual who stands in the shadows. He observes what you and I take for granted, and he questions everything. Thomas Jefferson once stated before Congress that liberty can be taken away by a tyrant preaching freedom. Is that what we are facing, my friends? Are we too busy looking into our iPhones, walking around like a bunch of dummies, caring more about overpriced coffee than the power given to us under the Bill of Rights? I have heard members of our own Congress state that the Constitution of the United States is an antiquated document, that it should be replaced. Now, the golden question is, my friends, replaced with what? Tonight, please welcome Wes from Conspiracy Corner, a Blogtalk Radio program dedicated to asking these tough questions. We're going to talk about what's going on behind closed doors and why we're entering a critical crossroads, possibly even a third world war. So, lock your doors and do not check that noise under your bed. It's only us here on Night Terrors. So, Wes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Don. I appreciate the opportunity to join like-minded folks in the search for the truth about our own lives, our current state of the affairs in the world, and like you said, keep asking those questions and pursue to the truth and beyond, and understand, as you mentioned, what our true power is, and that's one of the biggest conspiracies, if you will, and what we've been misled on a vast scale to the point where we don't even know our true nature and the power we have as individuals to affect our reality.
Exactly. It drives me nuts when I hear people that go, well, what's Washington going to do about it? What are they going to do? I mean, it's not up to Washington to do. It's our duty to take care of that.
Well, I think, I say many times about the Constitution, as you were referencing, they said it's an antiquated document, and people say, well, the Constitution, failed, the Constitution didn't work. Well, I think that the Constitution is a living, breathing thing. It can't exist in a vacuum. And, in concert with the rights it lays out that we inherently have, it also calls upon us to do our part. It, doesn't happen passively. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom, and we haven't, pulled our share. And,
exactly.
When a government becomes corrupt and tyrannical, it's our responsibility to correct the situation. And, of course, you can't, as you alluded to, you can't say, well, what's Washington going to do to fix the corruption in Washington? Absolutely nothing. It's up to the individual.
They're making too much money on it. Why fix something that's a good gravy train for them?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, we've seen that time and time again. And the later the hour gets, more and more people see that nothing any of these people do, is intended to benefit you. And there's always a poor excuse of, we can't, or there isn't the money, or this or that, but, when the financial system in 2008 collapsed under the weight of its own fraud, When you tell these big banks that, you're too big to prosecute because prosecuting you would, unravel the entire system. Well, that's, all the proof you need that we need a new system. But, from their perspective, they know, oh, well, I can do anything and get away with it, and I can borrow money for free. So it's, I'm betting someone else's money. And if I win, I win. If I lose, I get bailed out. So, why would you expect them to do anything but that? They're just, gaming the system based on the rules you've laid out for them, which at this point, they don't really have any rules. It's a free-for-all.
Exactly. I mean, at least during the Great Depression, they tried to do something by creating the Security and Exchange Commission to actually keep an eye on the people who caused that great disaster.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, too. 29 was a typical, planned, created bubble that burst, when they called it in. It's the same old game, extend credit, get people so they can only subsist on this borrowed money, this debt, and inflate a market, whatever the asset class is, whether it's houses or technologies, it doesn't matter. That's just the details. But what's interesting about 29 was, in concert with the Dust Bowl, that's what drove all the people to the cities to look for jobs, to get money to buy food to eat, as opposed to being a more agrarian society growing food, and the dollar, the debt, all that was less important. And I think, if it's World War III, these behind the curtain, the bankers, the governments, they've gotten to the point where they've devalued the currency so far, and there's millions of empty houses and millions of people without houses, and none of it makes sense. Everyone's now asking, well, if it's these people need houses and we have empty houses, why aren't these people in houses? They're starting to see there's always money for war, there's always money for bailouts, there's never money for the average person on the street who keeps the whole system going. You can't get gas or anything else if someone's not, quote, going to work and making sure the gas station's open or the power plant's being operated. So the people who do all the work get none of the benefit, and you go far enough down that line, people are just going to stop doing it and just fend for themselves.
I honestly believe that in the future, like you were talking about that, all the big agro companies and everything, they're going to work with local governments, and they're either going to have people who want, they're going to find a way to keep people from getting their individual gardens, to keep them from growing food, because in a way that's competition for them. They're going to say, well, these people can't grow food. Do they got a license that say they can grow food? Did they pay taxes for that? I see that coming. That's going to be something that's going to get rid of the gardens, and then you're going to have people that are going to do it, like underground in the basements, under the DL, where away from, and you're going to have like FBI agents go, and they're going to raid their home and say, Grandma's been like illegally growing tomatoes, so we're going to send her to the pokey.
Well, I mean, we pretty much already have that now. There was a case down in Florida where basically, they ruled that this woman was basically trying to set up an off-the-grid kind of lifestyle in her home, and collected rainwater and grew her own food. And so they started getting her, as they frequently do, on these, penny-ante, antiquated laws on the books about, and they distort the purpose of some of these laws. What they were saying is, well, to be, quote, a livable dwelling, you have to have power and water utilities. Well, she didn't have it with the utility company. She had the power and the water, but they said, so she said, okay, fine. She hooked it up, but didn't use it. And they said, no, you can't do that. Basically without saying it, they said, we don't make any money if you don't spend. We don't, the state gets no revenue if you're not paying, your energy tax, your water distribution tax. And I think that's what people are really realizing. The government only exists as a middleman that takes a portion of, of the value chain, but doesn't add anything to it. There's no benefit, there's no items, there's no assets, there's nothing that they add to the equation. They just say, oh, well, if you want to do this, you have to go through us, and you have to pay fees. So now it's like, well, why do we even have you around? You just sit back and collect your cut without it.
It makes you wonder if people like Thomas, Edison, or Tesla, or Alexander Graham Bell, if they were around today, would they starve, and would they be paupers, and nobody would know their names for the simple fact that their inventions would drastically upset the status quo?
Well, I think honestly that's really what happened with Tesla. You mentioned Edison, and if you look back,
they had rivalry.
Oh, absolutely. And, real quick on Tesla, basically, he, discovered how to, capture energy that's just, prevalent in, in nature. And people think that's kind of weird and to easily explain. Think about it as, as a radio, station you listen to. It's all around you. You can't hear it in your head. If you have a certain device or, if you were able to tune your ear to a certain frequency, all of a sudden there's all this information that's out there. And he figured out how to do that with power. And J.P. Morgan, of course, one of the, central bankers, said, well, where's the meter? How do we charge people for this? He's like, no, that's not the point. Like, we don't need to charge people. Everyone can have this. And like, oh, you can't do that.
I'm going to go with Edison. He's got a meter.
Right. And of course, there's, that's just one example, of which there are multiple examples of how our reality is distorted and our history has been, rewritten by the victors. And, again, it's all about control, regardless of whether it's gun control or, taxes or whatever. It's all designed to keep you ignorant of the fact that if en masse people don't cooperate, they have no real power. And I say this all the time, too. These politicians, the only real skill they have is lying to you in a way you believe it. If everyone just said, we're not going to pay our mortgages, the whole country, what are they going to do?
What are they going to do?
They really have, myself, a little bit of background. I'm kind of a banking insider. I worked in the mortgage industry throughout the whole crash for about 7 years. And, I saw what happens when that many people will go delinquent. They don't have the manpower at the banks to process all the non-payments. They don't have enough people in the courts to actually go through the legal. It's throwing your body on the gears of the machine. And, people could collectively have power doing it. But at this point, they've just destroyed the value of the money and kept the wages so low against inflation that it's happening anyway. I've talked to several people recently, who haven't paid a mortgage payment in years. And the banks aren't foreclosing on them. Why? Because the banks already have so many on their books, and now they're being held liable by the state to maintain the property. Someone's got to cut the grass so it doesn't just become blighted, and they don't want any more on their books.
Have you noticed that just recently in the last couple of years, nobody has heard a peep from Sallie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they're the ones that were primarily responsible for that disaster?
Well, that touches on one of the great lies, I guess, one of the great, manipulations. If you look all the way through, to the other side of this thing, the quote government backs up all these people's, housing debts, and just like if the state injures a citizen, a party in some way, the quote state has to pay restitution. Well, where does the state get that money? They get it from you. So they steal your money just every month on, just out of taxes, right out of your check. And then if they do something against you, they say, oh, well, we'll pay you back, but we'll take everyone's money and give it to you. So either way, you pay either way. It's a beautiful...
Sounds like Social Security. Yeah, we're taking your money. We're going to give it back to you. Sorry, we don't have it. Do you like dog food?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, hopefully you like horse meat, because that's all we got. Like the banker bailout. There's never any money for, the people who do all the work. And think about it. There's 300 some million people in this country, and they did 800 billion in one bailout. You could have given every man, woman, and child more than $1 billion each.
Wow.
Right. Think about that. $330 billion would have been $1 billion for every person.
It's kind of like, like during the fall of ancient Rome, if the emperors wanted to keep the people's attention or away from the worries so they could still hold on to that little bit of sacred power that they had, they did what was called bread and circuses. They just filled up the Colosseums with meat and wine and bread and had people perform and all that. And it was kind of like our talk shows today. I mean, it was just a way to get the people to stop thinking and just watch.
Well, that's what's scary, too. People don't realize it, even though they're living it. Nothing has really changed. Like we talked about for the show, it's the same basic plot of the story, and they just keep doing it over and over, and they control the history books. But it's exactly what's happening now. I mean, everyone's watching football, sports, Hollywood, everything's entertainment. And again, the Great Depression, you had, mass unemployment like we do now, somewhere between 20 and 30% in true unemployment. but you don't have red lines and all that, because of the what they call entitlement program, SNAP, all that stuff. That's the only thing keeping the people from, rioting and doing all these things, because they're starving. And if the government collapses, the dollar collapses, there's a Syrian electronic army or whatever the story is, there's a major cyber attack and there's a bank holiday like Cyprus or whatever reason that those checks don't go out. I tell people, look at Black Friday. People are literally tasing each other for an Xbox. Wait till it's like millions and millions of people that are hungry, and there's no EBT, there's no banks, there's no flow of money. Everything stops. I mean, it can go. Our society is a very, very thin veneer of civility.
That's why I remember my grandfather, and I teased him when I was a kid, because when you're a kid, you know everything and you're innocent. You don't know yet how the world works in the gray between the black and the white. My grandfather used to keep money underneath his mattress because he didn't trust banks. And the reason why he told me that, he said, son, these people can take your money and they do not have to give it back to you. And he said, because he experienced that during his family experienced that during the Great Depression. They lost their money. It was gone. And they gave it to these banks as a sacred trust. Hold my money so that, I can invest it and that I can have something for my future. And then with a flip of a switch, they woke up one morning and it was all gone.
Well, and that's what's so, funny about right now, like you're talking about, they're making it so you have to, afford all these license fees and all these, permission from the state to grow your own food or to have your own solar power, whatever it is. And at the same time, they're take all the money and destroy its value, so you can't afford the license, But when people are hungry, they're like, license or not, and, whether it's people, realizing what's going on en masse and changing their behavior, or they just, no longer have any other option. And I think that's where we really are getting, where there's no other option. There's no justice, the money's worthless, but the sunshine, the rain, the land essentially is all there for free. And I tell people this too. This country has, a very low population density as far as the total number of people and the total age.
Modern technology and for lack of a better word, the Walmart mindset has actually kept people from knowing the common sense skills of survival.
Well, it's it's really amazing when you understand that as John F. Kennedy tried to warn us, there is a secret society of people who a monolithic global threat to humanity. And if you really just think about it from a very simplistic way of looking at it, why is it you can have a bachelor's degree or higher in any of this education, quote education, but no one knows how to provide for themselves? You look at every other animal in nature. What's the first thing as soon as they pop out of the egg or the womb? The first thing they do is look to sustenance. And I always use something like a gazelle. They're born and 20 minutes later they're jogging with the herd, and they're eating grass. They inherently know basic things: food, brush, shelter, escaping from danger. How somehow they've convinced us to manipulate our actions so we don't even know how to feed ourselves. I mean, how insane is that?
And what's even more insane is that the people who do try to do it, or if I'm not talking about survivalists. I mean, just talking about the average Joe who suddenly realizes, hey, I have to prepare for this. If they try to do something about it, someone of authority, like grabbing a kid, who's grabbing a cookie out of a cookie jar, slaps him on the hand and says, "No, bad you, go away, sit down."
Absolutely, I think that's to a degree what's kind of playing out, in this Nevada thing at the Bundy Ranch, and it's easy to watch again how hypocritical government and government agents, Congress, etc. are. They're sitting there, saying, well, you can't bring like Harry Reid, we can't have Americans of office that violated constitutional law. You're guilds that are trading. People have been doing that, for at least 100 years, and they have the audacity to claim that you can't do that. With government and the quote enforcement class, where's the victim? You're just speeding ticket. Oh well, you went over the quote, posted speed, and now you owe me money. Well, who was hurt? Whose liberty was infringed by that? Just like these cows grazing on the land in Nevada. Is there a group of humans and people that were displaced? Or is there anyone crying foul? No, it's just the government saying we're using that land differently, and you're in our way. So we're going to send out snipers and cops and whatever. It has nothing to do with the reasons they give, but you can always see the underlying, as the term says, key bono, right? Who benefits?
It's also those two evil words, eminent domain.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because again, being a banking insider, again, following a lot of those financial aspects very closely. And they've been talking about that in California for years. With all of these, California is one of the highest bubble states as far as the, ridiculous expansion of, home values and all that. So again, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And when it fell, dramatically, 30, 40, 50%,
yeah,
you've got all these homes and all that are just becoming blighted, and it's like, for what? Who benefits from that? But then you realize, oh well, they're selling this stuff, or you may own this house, but now in order to save the banks or to save the neighborhood, we're going to come in, government, we're from the government, we're here to help.
Well, wasn't it Ronald Reagan who said that those were the most frightening words anyone could ever hear? I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Oh, and again, a lot of this stuff functions when people have a financial, household margin where, okay, you're taking, 20% in taxes, but I still have enough disposable income. I still have my, my Roman Coliseum television entertainment. I still get, you increase healthcare costs, you increase food costs, you increase gas costs. That margin goes away, and then probably starve to death, or I can, do what I have to do to survive, and and potentially end up literally fighting for my own survival. And many people can't reconcile that, cognitively in a, heads up, this is probably what's coming mode, but it's too big to ignore. Then it's like, okay, well now we have to do it.
I've always believed that if the government ever gets into a dire strait, they're going to take little sections of the country and call them, they're not going to call them like concentration camps or something like they did during the Second World War with Manzanar and stuff like that. They're going to call these places like liberty camps or freedom zones, and everybody's going to be able to go there, and they're going to promise you'll get a job, we'll give you a place to sit and everything, and basically it's going to be like Manzanar. You go there, you might get one meal a day, but it's going to be like its own little encased bubble. I think the government's going to do everything they can to keep the people inside these liberty camps or freedom zones, a.k.a. concentration camps, from actually ever going out and telling people, because they're going to be making money off these people. And as long as they live in these little freedom camps or zones like that, they're going to exist. I can see the government doing that in the future.
Well, I mean, you've already got the, again, the conspiracy, if you will, about, the FEMA camps and, a lot of these detention centers, et cetera, have been photographed, and there's video evidence, et cetera. And it's interesting. You look at the fences and stuff around that. The barbed wire is pointing in. It's not to keep danger out. It's to keep you in. And combine that. Look at even recent history. Look at places like Katrina. When there was a major national emergency.
Only the government, after 3 or 4 weeks afterwards, somebody would stand up and say, "Hey, don't people have to drink and don't people have to eat? What are we doing about this, guys?"
Right, and I point out that too. I mean, that was something that there was obvious forewarning of. A hurricane that size doesn't just pop up all of a sudden. I mean, it's days out. They see that this is coming, and they still couldn't do anything. And to your point, where did all those people go? They locked them in the Superdome. They didn't have proper facilities, to manage. The food, the waste, just to, provide basic human service in that, and they wouldn't let you leave either. I mean, it really is just put into prison. And they also, basically declared martial law and went, door to door and took away people's weapons. And, that's, none of that is beneficial to the people. It's just to, herd them. I help people, see in plain sight things like, just the words we use. Human resources, That's how we're viewed. We are just like cattle or some sort of mineral resource. It's a human resource. It's a giant open air farm for humans to take their labor.
to talk in government speak or double speak, we're only as viable as our economic value.
Absolutely, and I think that touches on another kind of. There's a new movie coming out as well called Transcendence, which kind of gets into some of this this kind of train of thought. But it's interesting as well. You look at the technology, and you look at these, what people call, the New World Order, Illuminati, the financial elite, etc. The powers that be. They've realized that this internet thing, while again, of course, it was developed by DoD, it's an implement to help coordinate war and financial transactions globally. We've kind of hijacked that, as my friend Clayton would say. We hijacked their internet to share information about what they're doing to us, and they're also getting to the technological point where they realize there's way too many of us around to be able to learn what is being done to us. And also they have the technology with the drones. They can getting to the point where they're going to have thousands of drones all over the country, all over the world. They can be programmed autonomous, and the powers that be only need a relatively small world population to provide them with the lavish lifestyle they're used to. And it's reaching a critical mass. It's becoming too dangerous for us to be alive because they know they're severely outnumbered if we all wake up.
And if they got enough of those drones out there and they're armed, it's basically death by remote control.
It really is. And again, you only need a small number of people. Are you familiar with the Georgia Guidestones? Oh yeah, definitely check that out. Actually, my brother lives not too far from there. It's called the Georgia Guidestones, and it's kind of a large stone structure that was created by no one knows exactly who. There's only scant details.
Wait a minute. Is that the one that says that the world should be at a population of 500,000 or something like that?
500, yeah, right. World should be maintained below 500 million.
Yeah.
So again, if those kinds of the people who would want to do that, you do the math. That's about 7.5 billion people that they consider, as the Clintonite type would say, worthless eaters. They're just right. They don't provide any benefit to we those in power. So you've got to go. And I think that's where the whole Agenda 21 and all that comes. And just like you were talking about, the government control everything. A lot of people have heard of the NDAA, but fewer have heard of the National Defense Preparedness Plan. And again, like we talked about earlier, just like the Hitler and the Nazi organization, all of that. This National Defense Resource Preparedness Plan lays out the quote legality for the government in quote state of emergency to claim the right to all resources. If you have a farm or you have a lake with a reservoir, you've stockpiled food or whatever. The government now owns that, and of course we, the benevolent government, will distribute that for the best good of the most people. But of course, we know is not going to work out well for us.
And for the spin doctors out there, there's already historical precedents, because when Abraham Lincoln was president during the Civil War, he even got rid of the right of habeas corpus. You didn't have to be up in front of a judge and be told who and why and how you're going to be incarcerated. He just did it. He could.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like we see that at the Bundy thing, Bundy Ranch as well, with the First Amendment zone. You have an unalienable right to free speech, but you can only do it in this little box over here that we've cordoned off for you. And kudos to those folks. They're like, yeah, no, we're not going over there. And it's like I said, it's getting to the point where making decisions and actions and preparedness for your own survival everything's illegal now. So you leave people with very little choice. You either comply and just get screwed to the wall, if you will, or you don't comply, and now you have to not only fend for yourself but also literally confront those who don't want you.
Unfortunately, a sad fact. Right now, Wes, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a break, give you a chance to drive without having to talk at the same time, and we'll be back later.
All right, sounds great.
All right, stay tuned. Hello, welcome back to Night Terrors. This is your host, Donald Allen Kirch. I'm here with Wes, who is a host of his own radio show called Conspiracy Corner, and we're talking about the government, Big Brother, and possibly the start of World War III. Hey, Wes, you still with us?
Yes, sir.
All right. Speaking of World War III, what's your thoughts about Putin and the crisis that's going on in Russia right now?
Well, I mean, I think there's, as many things, an enlightened mind will look at things on more than one level. And, they're kind of the surface level, storylines are, basically the CIA has, done a coup in Ukraine. So from now on, when you hear the Ukrainian government says, that basically is a, puppet government that's being orchestrated by the CIA. These things aren't even conspiracy, really. The CIA Director Brennan was just in Ukraine last week. John Kerry was just there a few days ago, right before everything started to go further downhill. My co-host Dave always likes to point out the conversation between Obama and Putin, prior to the second election, where he says, well, after the next election, I'll have more flexibility. There's this kind of Hollywood, narrative and presentation to all this. And allegedly, Ukraine is being threatened by the Russians and this and that, but the other side of that coin, even on this level, is, well, the Ukrainian people's government has been hijacked by a foreign government, namely ours. So they're, Russia potentially is just defending, the annexation of one of its neighboring countries. But deeper than that, behind the scenes, just like, as I'm sure you can, touch on too, just like World War II, there's big money behind the scenes of, both sides of every major war. The CIA, came out of the office, I don't know exactly what's the old name of it, but anyway, what became the CIA, and George Bush Sr. was director of the CIA before he became president, so it's a little too convenient for people who ask questions.
I think, wasn't he director of the CIA during the Vietnam War?
I believe so.
Yeah.
And his son become president, and of course now who are they talking about? It's a potential candidate, right? Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
I was saying, somehow people say, oh, these aren't ruling dynasties, like days of old. Well, hold on. We've had, several Bushes. We're looking potentially, the next one potentially is a Clinton and a Bush. Like, clearly things have not gotten better under either of these, management groups. So why are we doing this again? That's Einstein's definition of insanity.
It was strange that you mentioned John Kerry, because I remember one of the things that made him famous was his testimonies to Congress about the behavior of the American soldier during the Vietnam War. And it's been proven that some of the stuff that he was telling the Congress was given to him by Soviet and KGB informants who were using him as a vehicle for their propaganda.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting. Have you seen the new Captain America movie?
No, I haven't. Not yet. Believe me, I want to.
Oh, it's pretty good. I just watched that the other night, and it's interesting. There's a part in there where they're talking about, kind of, out of the, World War II and all that. At one point they talk about, from that kind of, that exercise, they realize that when you try to take people's freedoms, that they fight back, to keep them. So the plan for the next iteration is to make people want you to take away their freedoms, and and in lieu of security. And it's that again, Hollywood mirroring or potentially foreshadowing what's really going on, and we can get into the weeds about who runs Hollywood and all of that. But they put it right out there, 1 degree of perception away from what's actually going on. It's I mean, that's frightening.
Yes. One of the things that always gets me is that I know sooner or later it's inevitable. Empires fall, nations change, but I've always wondered about that one poor, for lack of a better word, that one poor bastard that's going to be in a Washington, D.C. office the day that the government collapses. And one of the last things that he's going to think about before his doors are kicked open by people who have had enough is all that money, all the billions and trillions of dollars that we wasted. We could have used it at that particular second.
Well, I mean, it's, again, Hollywood kind of has given us, depictions of that, with the, White House down and some of these other recent movies about, the White House getting, stormed or taken down, the remake of Red Dawn, all of these kind of things. But there's also, just like we see with the media, they say they're reporting from this location or whatever, but then, you see, the things in the background, or you see a green screen kind of blip, and it's like they're not there at all. So, again, watching it on TV and the president or whoever's in the Oval Office, he could be anywhere. He could be in, again, these secret underground bunkers, with the same exact set, right? Just like a movie set. And it looks exactly like, even, have the view out the window behind him, from the Oval Office, and it looks like it's, daytime or whatever outside. It all fits, but it's totally fabricated.
So with all these actions that people are taking, and with money becoming, well, for lack of a better word, money's starting to become crap. Do you honestly think that we're probably going to be heading toward a war to do some major population dispersal so that we can help again bring up the resources? And because there's always money in rebuilding.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's, in many ways how we got where we are with things like the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United Nations itself. All of these things generated, the Bank for International Settlements, all these offices and organizations that were set up after World War II to, quote, set up, to, pay and finance and coordinate the rebuilding process. And, like you're saying, every empire eventually falls, and the same thing applies to the quote world reserve currency. That is not a permanent thing. It's it's semi-permanent at best, and eventually whoever has it will lose it, and it will go somewhere else. And real quick, an interesting aside on that is I've seen people who have done some research on that who point out that it only ever goes west. The seat of power only navigates the globe east to west.
Wow. I honestly think that the pain in the ass that humanity is going to have to face in the future, we won't have tyrants. I honestly think that the tyrants of the future will be corporations. If you want to also count China in as a corporation, you can, but I honestly believe that corporations are going to be like OCP on RoboCop. They're going to own us so much, we are going to actually wake up one morning and be a product that they sell.
Well, I mean, we really are at that point now. There's a documentary called The Corporation. Have you seen that one?
Yes, I have, and it's scary.
Oh, it is. And again, it basically lays out, today's, what we understand of the corporate structure and all that. It's a new spin on the same old paradigm. It used to be the church, then it was this, it became the bankers, and then the bankers, as Dave Brindley talks about, color of law, right? They put all these, legal terms and all these, this language together. Again, just, law is another language. And one of the ways to kind of, see through the lies and find more of the truth is you have to understand the speaker, right? If you're listening to the government or government agents talking, especially if, places like the Council on Foreign Relations, any of those people, when they say we have to do this for, our progressive agenda, you have to put yourself in their first person and understand that they're saying that the we is not you. The we is, and we are doing this for, a progressive reason. And progressive, again, in their mind is defined as whatever progresses towards our greater control over you. But people, as they say, we see the world as we are, not as it is. And people hear that and they think, oh, well, they want to say, oh, well, I'm part of the we. Of course I am. But then again, history and even current events point out that none of these things seem to end up benefiting you. So maybe you're not part of the we. As George Carlin said, it's a big club and you ain't in it.
I don't want to be a they either.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's, how do they do it, right? It's this, the names of, the dates, the places, the reasons, are always different, but the goal and the outcome is always the same. And again, keeping in the spirit of your show, fear and terror, right? I mean, that's how they do it, is fear. And that's why they intentionally destroy the value of the money and leave you where money is the only recourse for survival, and you don't control it, and they keep you afraid. Well, I have to keep going to my job every day and working really hard and hope it gets better. But meanwhile, everything is being taken from you in that venture because you're afraid of what would happen if I don't go with the program. Even if, there's only one program and it's not very good for me, but I'm afraid to try something different. Just like, again, people are afraid of not paying their taxes. They say it's voluntary, but if you don't, men with guns will come to your house and say, we want our pound of flesh. Quote, you owe us.
I've actually told people in jest, but if you look at it in a certain way, it's true. If I had a choice between being interrogated by the KGB or going to an IRS audit, I would rather go to the KGB, because at least when I'm useless and the KGB is done with me, they're going to kill me. The IRS is going to leave me alive. They say, oh, we took your car, we took everything you have, you don't have any. Oh, and the suit that you're wearing, we want that by 3 p.m. Have a nice day.
Well, I think, for people to, those who are waking up to this and thinking for themselves, one of my favorite things to say is don't believe a word that I say. I don't want anyone to believe anything that I say. Yes, I can verify a large percentage, I can point you in the, true history, but that's not the point. The biggest way we learn is from experience, and you can't take that from someone. They can control, again, very Orwellian world we live in now where, thought crime. You haven't actually done anything wrong, but you're thinking wrong. And, you have to be controlled by fear, because that's the only way they can control your thoughts, and your thoughts control your actions. So as long as you're thinking within their box, your actions will never be outside of their box.
Well, every now and then I stop and, like most people who care about where this country is going, sometimes I stop and I try to figure out where exactly in the history or the timeline of our nation did we lose control. And there's two particular spots that I come up with: the conception of the Federal Reserve Bank, and also during the Second World War when Roosevelt took some elected people out of certain positions and put captains of industry in there because they knew more about mass production than the electoral people did. Those two, and that's actually what created later what Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex. I think those three events were probably what was the end to the beginning to the end, so to speak.
Well, it's that's exactly right, and it's easy for once if you're able to, and it's very difficult for many. I reference the Matrix a lot in this way. That they have a rule that they don't wake up a mind, they don't unplug a mind from the Matrix after it's reached a certain age. The mind has trouble letting go, and that's what we're talking about a few minutes ago. That's where most people are. The reality is so much worse and so much scarier than going along with things, hoping it's going to get better, even though deep down it really isn't. It's too scary, and that's why people say, well, how can you not look at this evidence for whether it's 9/11, the Federal Reserve, the Mossad, any of these, the economy, any of these topics, people will reject every single one because it's cognitive dissonance, and at a very core level, it's a mental, psychological protection mechanism. If I actually look into this with an open mind and come to the conclusion that, yes, these things are true, then you can't believe any more of the lies. You have to change. In many ways, it's a law of nature. When a certain way of survival becomes, no longer sustaining survival, the organism must choose to change what they're doing and how they're doing it for their own survival or perish. And, most people will not mentally be able to, break loose of that control and that mental fear, and until something large enough happens where everyone's like, okay, we can't ignore it anymore. Now what do we do? Well, it's too late at that point, which is, that's why it's so interesting how they demonize preppers. It's like, well, that's my point. It's like, well, how can being prepared ever be wrong? If none of the conspiracy, any of those things come to pass, then the worst case scenario is, well, you've got extra food or water, or you go camping a lot, right? There's no downside to it.
I heard once that there is an emergency preparedness order that was given to the United Nations peacekeeping forces is that if they know that there's a prepper out there in the woods and he's got like a barn full of, food, they have the quote-unquote, and I'm doing the quotations in the air, the right to come and seize it for the good of the people.
Right. I mean, that's what that, the aforementioned National Defense Preparedness Plan is. And go read that, your listeners yourself. Just go read even some parts of that. Because, I mean, again, government has endless time and almost endless money, and they have these things are just, it's all public information. Just go read it. It says, it outlines, who's in charge of this district and, everything's accounted for. It's very corporate in that way. Everything is accounted for here, and couple that with the NSA, metadata, they can know where everyone, they look at your purchases, unless you bought all your stuff in cash and have an undisclosed location that's, just some giant federal park or something where no one lives, you truly be off the grid. They know almost everything about us, even your grocery store, valued customer, little tagger thing you use, all that's used to mine your purchases.
I've always wondered that. I mean, they always say they give you this thing like in my part of the country, they give you this thing, this hype where if you just use this card and you get a certain amount of money, they will give you a discount on your gas. And you could take that same card and go and get, discounts on the gas. Well, who says that, like you said, there's not some big, like, centralized computer center where, people with the little nerdy glasses and the tape are looking at it and say, oh, it looks like every now and then this guy buys way too much beer. Maybe we can, maybe he's an alcoholic. Maybe we can use this against him if he ever becomes a pain in our ass.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, that touches on a whole other kind of, aspect there. I don't have full time to go into, but yeah, I mean, initially it's kind of a marketing thing. As my wife will point out, it's like, why do we always use coupons for stuff we don't buy? Because they know what you already buy. You don't need any incentive to buy what you're already buying. Let's give you a coupon on a different product to try to entice you to buy something you don't normally buy. And, bring it to today where they have the satellite surveillance, drone surveillance, email surveillance, banking. They know almost everything about you. I mean, you really think about it and, spend some time kind of, meditating on how much information is, in cyberspace about you, especially with things like Facebook, the places like the CIA, they were like, we never thought people would volunteer this much information. It's like, it worked out way better than they ever could have expected. I mean, you can tell where people's kids go to school. I mean, it's an infinite number of ways to know, pressure points. How do I control this person?
And the newest thing to enter the ring is that I've heard that the webcams that are inside computer screens that you buy, people can hack into your computer, and not only can you look out to them, they can look into you.
Oh yes, and things like the Xbox, and it's been speculated as well with smartphones, that they can log into that and just listen, to what's going on. The Xbox Connect software where it has the camera that sees your body position to play your games. Well, I mean, they can tell how many people are in a room. I mean, it's really scary stuff. And real quick, I want to make one comment, like I said, what about fear? Well, I like to tell people, a lot of this stuff is scary and a lot of it is very real, but fear is not real. Fear is an emotional response to danger. Choice how you respond to a stimuli. I mean, that's part of being alive, and you choose that emotional response. And if you realize that fear is not productive and that you can only, much of it is out of your control, then it's easier to just you have to let go of it. Kind of like, in Fight Club, you have to let go.
Yeah.
And once you let go and realize I can't, change a lot of these aspects of the danger, but I can change my own mentality and change what I can do and try to not be afraid and to alter my behavior in a way that is productive.
Exactly. Fear is the unknown, and whatever we don't understand, we fear it because of the simple fact that we're ignorant to it.
Absolutely. And that's really the first hardest step, is to say, I'm willing to look at the world around me and take it for what it is with an open mind, wherever that leads me. And, that is very difficult to do. But if you can get past that, then you will start to realize your true nature and that you do have control over this. If you can get past the fear, then you can change reality. You can change the future, and that's the power they definitely don't want you to know. Which is why they respond to uprisings so violently. Because if the last thing they want is a great example in a digitally connected world where all these people stood up and it worked. Then then the whole gig is up. Then like, oh, right, you're right. We outnumbered them, 300 million to a couple thousand. Why are we listening to these people? That's game over for the control system.
What did you think of the people that were against the Wall Street and were just out there in their little, like, for lack of a better word, hobo camps?
Well, I think a lot of them they knew something was wrong. They didn't understand it. They don't know who to blame. They knew something was wrong. They don't know what it is, how to fix it, or even what to do next. But they knew they had to try to do something different. And like many things today, with the amount of money sloshing around freely from the Fed to give to the government or any group that wants to control the populace, those things get infiltrated. The Tea Party group, there's a lot of people who believe the idea of it all, but the actual functional bodies are very co-opted and controlled opposition. I've seen that firsthand, in my area. My friend and I got thrown out physically of a Tea Party meeting for asking about banking.
Wow. So,
and again, real quick, there's been a large slew of high-level bankers all over the world that have, circumstances just in this year alone. There was recently another one of those. I think it's 20-something now.
Yeah, I touched on that once. I was talking to some people about that, and I'm going, if this was like auto mechanics, the FBI would be on this like something fierce, serial killer thing or something going on, But it's the bankers. It's like, I don't know. I'm gonna go get rich.
Don't pay attention to that. Let's look for this missing Malaysian plane for.
That's a weird thing too. I mean, we got satellites that could zoom in on me reading a magazine in my front yard and tell them exactly what magazine, what page I'm on, what article I'm reading, and we can't find an airplane.
Well, again, I think that's where we're so far down the line and the hour is late that the sheer volume of lies they've been telling for so long, to try to keep covering that with more lies, it just becomes this web where they've painted themselves into a corner because the last thing they said was just ridiculous. And now we have to tell you, oh, well, that was different. Now it's this. And it just becomes even more ridiculous. It's the largest airliner we have. It's almost impossible in today's world.
That kind of reminded me of a quote. I don't know it all the way, but it was one that Donald Rumsfeld said. We know the know, we don't know the unknown, and we know
the known unknown, the unknown unknowns. He's a real piece of work. I could talk for the next half an hour on Rumsfeld, but I won't.
But what do you think of this? This is like a concern of mine. What do you think of the fact that our armed forces now no longer protect and serve the people? We're kind of like McWar Incorporated. We go out, we fight other nations' wars cheaper and faster, and we guarantee that once we leave, they can hate us just as much as they did when we first got there.
Well, I think, the easiest way to look at that is a paper written by General Smedley Butler of the United States Marine Corps. Oddly enough, they didn't mention it to me in my Marine Corps experience about this, but it's called War is a Racket, and he basically outlines exactly the history of war and who controls it behind the scenes, and he saw it firsthand, and that basically is what it is. It's all about control, and as I think it was Rothschild said, give me control of the nation's money supply, and I care not who makes the laws. And that's really where we are. And, I ask people that, too. It's like, if all these wars are about oil, and we won, how come the oil's still so freaking expensive? If we won, shouldn't it have gone down to cheaper than it was before the war? That's why we fought it, right?
Well, I think at the beginning of the war, wasn't like the average price of gas like $1.40, and now it's like almost up to $5 in some parts of the country. That's
absolutely right. And that gets into the whole petrodollar discussion. I'm not sure how much time we got left on this broadcast, but that's really what this whole the whole thing boils down to with the impending collapse of World War III. It's all about the petrodollar, the U.S. The requirement that all oil transactions be denominated in U.S. dollars, and that's really the only thing keeping demand for the dollar to be used today. And that's exactly what Russia and China and all these other countries are doing now, is walking away from that. And once they stop holding that money in reserve, it comes flooding back to our country, just like it did in Germany, with the hyperinflation kind of thing.
Yeah. I remember once there was a friend of mine, he was in the Doctors Without Borders program, and he came back from Zimbabwe, and he gave me what you call a curiosity. I actually own a $50 million bill from Zimbabwe. It's probably worth about $3. I don't know. But it's like I point to it and I say, hey, people, look, I'm a millionaire. I'm a multi-millionaire. And that's what it's going to be. Wasn't there a time where they were going to make a coin? The Congress was going to make a congressional coin that would be $1 billion or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's right back to what I was saying about the next lie has to be more be a larger lie than the previous lie. And here's one of those things. It's like, so hold on. What you're saying is we have no money, or we don't have enough money, so we're just going to mint a coin and say it's worth $1 trillion. Well, it's like, well, if you can do that, why am I working for it? Why do I? Right? I mean, that's one of my favorite conundrums, right? You're saying you have to take some of my money from out of my check and taxes to pay for all this stuff, but you're just, you can always just, produce it on demand for awards or bailouts or whatever. Like, well, if you can just produce it, why do you take in mine?
Yeah.
If you need more money for, government revenue, just do whatever you did last time to make it for the bailout. Just do that. Leave me alone.
Just print more of your monopoly money and just leave me out of the equation.
Right. That's one of those logical paradigms that falls apart once you start paying attention to what's going on. It's like, well, most people just want to be left alone by the government at this point. And you realize, oh, wait, you're not allowed to opt out of their control structure. Well, then again, you have to ask, well, then why are we supporting this control structure? It doesn't benefit us. If you really examine it, it's a parasite. And again, The Matrix, if you've seen that, and know as well as I do, when Agent Smith is trying to hack into Morpheus's brain. Are you familiar with that part?
Yeah, he calls the human race a virus.
Right, and that's what these people are. These people are a virus. They feed us lies and propaganda and fraud and keep us running on this treadmill to nowhere. And if you question it, you're beaten into compliance. I think most people really do suffer, from a mass scale Stockholm syndrome, where we love our masters because they keep us alive. But, meanwhile, we are the ones who should be capable of our own survival without them. We're the host. And, these people, just like a virus, they're going to kill the American middle class host that they've, lived on for the last 100 years. And they're just going to move it west to China. And then that's why they have these ghost cities. They've built these massive, buildings and production in China for all these cities that no one lives in. But once they have the reserve currency and everything is done in Chinese, they get that temporary benefit from controlling the fiat currency, and they can move all of these peasants into these things, and boom, they have a middle class. And they'll just start it over again. In another 100, 150 years, you'll have some World War IV with, China being in the same boat we're in, just like we're in the same boat Germany was in.
All my life, I've always assumed, from watching movies and, the propaganda and the world events, that the Third World War was going to be between the United States and the Soviet Union. Of course, the Soviet Union fell, and then suddenly we had to get another monster. It ended up being terrorism. And I honestly believe that I'd put my money on the fact that the Third World War isn't even going to have anything to do with us at first. I think it's actually going to be something that's going to start between India and China, because those two right now are trying to become the influence of their hemisphere.
Well, I think that's another one of those interesting little, factoids. If you really look closely at it, the U.S. has been the dominant power in the last, several decades, But let's look at that. 330 million people out of roughly 8 billion.
Yeah.
Why, just like the again, as above, so below. The micro is endemic of the macro. It's all in the end, right? It's all the same. It's fractal, just like nature. And in this country, 330 million are ruled by a small Congress and corporate group. And globally, 8 billion people are at the whims of, all of the smaller groups in concert with each other. And that's what we always come back to, the central bankers, because they control, everyone does everything for money because money is their means of survival.
Yes.
So they just control it and manipulate it for their benefit. And, people don't, who haven't done a lot of research, they've heard the phrase, all roads lead to Rome. Well, they still do. It's the same thing. And people say, oh, well, how could they possibly have that much money or whatever? It's like, well, if you bought gold in 1900, it'd be worth a lot today, right? Well, what if you owned that gold from 1400? What's it worth today?
The same as gold is as far as weight, but if you want to put historical or antiquity equations into it, then it hypes it up a little.
Right. If you, in a financial term, if you look at it, the time value of money, if you had the, the benefit of the increase in value over that much time, and we can touch real quick on, the whole Rome thing, right? So, let me ask you this, what your thoughts are. What do these three places have in common? The Vatican, the City of London, and Washington, D.C.
Weren't they all built to be seats of power?
Yes, that's correct. There's a lot of interesting parallels between these three places. Also,
wasn't the Brotherhood of the Masonry, wasn't it involved in creating all three?
I believe it was. And, one of the signs of that is the second item I'll mention. The first one is that, they are all city-states that are not part of their host nation. If you're in Italy and you walk into the Vatican, you're in a foreign country, right?
Yes.
People don't understand that it's the same way with D.C. And the City of London is not London as you know it. It's the corporation of the City of London. It's its own citadel. And that's what people don't understand about D.C., which is why all these things that they're doing don't actually apply. The Constitution doesn't apply in D.C. It's not a state.
It's a district.
It's another country. All right, it's another country. And they all, point two, the whole masonry thing, all three of these cities have a Egyptian obelisk in their center.
The Washington Monument, Cleopatra's Needle, and I think isn't the other one the Staff of St. Peter?
Yes, and if you look into the masonry aspects of that, and it gets some of what is kind of broadly accurately termed as the occult. And if you really look at that, it's very clear to see in the Vatican where you have the phallus, the masculine, and the other side of that is an open area in the masculine and the feminine. And a lot of this is reason these groups are in power and stay in power is because they are drawing on knowledge from antiquity, ancient knowledge. Again, you probably know, being the history buff, you said you were, about Hitler and his quest for ancient knowledge.
Yes, the Spear of Destiny, and he'd look for the Ark of the Covenant, and he tried to find the Holy Grail. In fact, Himmler had his own little cult that was kind of based on the Teutonic Knights.
And again, we see that in Hollywood and, the Indiana Jones, where they go through all that, and that's all actually very historically accurate. But, again, it's hidden in plain sight. And, this is an interesting thing, too. Like, people see the swastika, and they automatically think Nazi.
It's a Hindu symbol. It's used to ward off evil spirits.
And again, looking at it, as if looking at it from a first-person perspective of you're in that circle, you're the evil spirit that they're trying to ward away, right? It's their system. You are just on the periphery of it. And you look at they call the Nazi eagle, right? Well, that's very similar. That's also a very old symbol. Symbols are very important.
It was the symbol of Imperial Rome for 10 centuries.
Absolutely. It was the symbol of the Nazi Germans. And, what is the symbol of the U.S.?
The bald eagle. There was a big debate. The founding fathers had a big debate. Jefferson wanted it to be the dove. Benjamin Franklin wanted it to be the turkey, and actually it was John Adams that came up with the idea of the bald eagle because he said it was a majestic bird.
And again, behind the scenes of all of it, again, with the Masons, the ancient knowledge, these symbols are used and reused, and the symbols are very powerful, and many of them date back to ancient Hindu texts and Sumerian texts, and a lot of people say, oh, well, how can any of that be relevant today? All this sounds a little kooky to me, and I say, let's look back in recent history of our time, some of the people that we said were really smart people, and I always love to look at and talk about Carl Sagan a little bit. And if you're familiar with the Voyager 1 spacecraft,
yes,
it has a golden disc on it that has simply coded information about where the craft came from with our solar system, and it also has inscriptions on there in lots of different languages, because we really that's interesting. Why would we put all these languages, right? Because we don't know if they can even read, if they're even human, etc. But it always struck my fancy in this line of thought. Well, why is one of the texts selected for, again, a very limited space on this and Sumerian?
Yes.
Why would they? Carl Sagan was kind of in charge of what went on there. So why would they put that on there if there was no truth to this?
Well, also he also put on there because he assumed that maybe it would be encountered by a alien life form that is above written language and stuff like that. So in mathematical terms, he put exactly where 10 known pulsars were around Sol, our sun, so that if they couldn't find us by language, they can find us by astrology.
And again, the ancients always, for whatever reason, were very fascinated by the cosmos.
Yes. Just put you on the hot seat there. What is your take on UFOs and alien abductions and stuff like that? Because almost everybody in the world seems to no, I have an uncle that was like, went down to Mississippi, lost 3 days, doesn't know what happened to him. What's your thought on that? Do you think that they're coming to visit us? I don't think so, because why would an advanced race want to come talk to people whose only primary function seems to be tribal warfare?
Well, there's kind of two aspects of it. Just from an infinite mathematical view of reality, I think it's foolish to think that, in all of existence, we're the only race, of beings that has enough intelligence to enter and, leave their planet and enter the cosmos.
Absolutely.
And, have they been here? Personally, I think yes. I love the show Ancient Aliens. There's a lot of, again, it's kind of like Doomsday Preppers in a way. It's presented as kind of as to be hokey, right? It's all the information is in front of you. It's just the perception that they broadcast. They want you to see it and think about it a certain way. They have to, in a way, they put it out there for you to control how your opinion of it is formed. And I think it's very likely that other beings would be out there, and should they, again, maybe it's very much like Star Trek, but instead of us being the explorers, we're one of those backwater planets.
Yeah.
So would they come here? Probably. Would they land and say, hi, we're here? No, because as you said, like we're very dangerous. Now that we have, the nuclear power, and, we'll be going from, as Michio Kaku would say, a level 0, race to a level 1, where we have, planetary control, control of the atom, control of the weather, and I think that they would come, and try to help us along to get to the point where we're not, where we can join a more galactic kind of community without destroying it.
I've always liked the classic The Day the Earth Stood Still, where Michael Renee's character was standing there in front of that big robot, and he was telling us, we don't care what you do, but if you bring it out to us, we're going to, backslap you back in the corner, paraphrasing. But I always liked that. I always thought that was a profound. It wasn't exactly a dictatorial warning. It was a guy just shaking his finger, warning him, don't mess with us.
Well, it's another example of, they've controlled how we look at something. there's a lot of conspiracy, if you will. I mean, you can go back and look at many of our own presidents. Ronald Reagan did it. George Bush. They mentioned, one of my favorites is Ronald Reagan, when he kind of mentioned that. Don't quote me on his exact wording, don't off the top of my head, but he said, I often wonder, if there was some sort of alien threat that could unify the planet, like some common thing, kind of like in the movie Independence Day. All the whole world is awash with fear and hatred and strife against each other. But if there was some greater threat, upon us, then we could unite as a planet. I think it's very strange, if you think about it, to hear an American president say that. It's not maybe they would come here and save us from ourselves. That's not that wasn't what he put out there.
If memory serves, didn't he also say that in front of the Grand Assembly of the United Nations?
I believe so. And again, that's also, to me, not coincidence that it's at the UN.
Yeah. Well, I do believe that there is life out there, but I think that this time, we always we look at the great discoverers throughout our history. Christopher Columbus and Walter Riley and all those. This time, when the aliens come, if they're not peaceful, we're going to be the natives. And we all know that in those stories, the natives of wherever the quote-unquote modern or sophisticated world go, they bring with them nothing but disaster, plagues, and I mean, it's just everything that is bad about mankind, but we'd get it from another species. And I know if they were violent, with the level of technology they have, ours would be like in a comparison between stone knives and bear skins.
It's absolutely correct, and I think there's so much more to reality in our existence, and the nature of the universe, and things in many ways do happen for a reason, and whether there's a divine entity, a god, what have you, that's coordinating everything, or if we really do have free will. I mean, personally, I believe that this is not the first iteration of intelligent human beings on this planet. And I think there's a lot of supporting evidence, with things like the Great Pyramids, the Nazca Lines, all of these ancient structures and civilizations we know about, but the new things that we're just now rediscovering. Again, things like the Mayan calendar that are, really as accurate, if not just a hair more accurate than our atomic clocks. And how could they possibly know all the things? How do they build all of these things? It's because this isn't the first time we've gone through this. And one of my favorites, I'm a big movie buff, you probably picked up on. I love the movie Contact, when Jodie Foster is, interviewing to go in this machine, whatever it is. I don't even know what it does. And, they're interviewing her, and they ask her, if you meet these people or whoever, and you have one question that you're allowed to ask them, what would it be? And her question was, how did you survive your own technological adolescence without destroying yourself?
That's a very good question, because I think we're on the brink. We're going to have to go through some kind of new scientific renaissance, or re-identification of self, or it's going to go up with a bang.
Right, and I think it wouldn't be the first time that that's happened. I think, again, just like you mentioned, the ancient Hindu text, ancient aliens talks about too, things like the Mahabharata, where they talk about, these historical records of things, and, what seems to sound like, air-to-air combat, and, balls of fire, and, they describe what sounds much like, nuclear radiation, and there's some of the places you can go that are, relative to these stories, to this day still have a higher than average, radioactive signature. And, I often wonder how much information is stored in these seats of power. Places like, the libraries at the Vatican. We know through history all these empires, raided each other's, libraries, and kept a lot of this information. Either they kept it or they destroyed it so no one else could know. Or at least they destroyed that copy. But how much of this information is known by some in our species, but it's kept from the rest of us. And what would happen if, there were some cataclysm, and from the ashes of that, we rediscovered, these documents, these parts of the Bible, what have you, and it's like suddenly this much larger picture begins to emerge.
There's also, since you're talking ancient texts, I mean, how about the story of Ezekiel in the Bible, where he spotted, quote unquote, the wheel, and it, and he described how it would land. It sounds like that could have been an alien encounter too.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things. I think just like the Greeks and the Romans, and a lot of the things that are discussed in their stories, and their gods, and those were the explanations for things that they couldn't explain at the time. And the more our science and technology, and like I alluded to earlier about a radio receiver, there's a lot out there, not only in the physical and non-physical universe, that we're slowly developing the technological tools to even discover that they already exist.
Oh yeah,
but it's also on a knowledge level. With those tools that we can measure, when we start to get to the point where we can measure certain things, then it opens our mind to, well, if this was here the whole time and we just couldn't see it, there could be more of that, and we get to, like you said, a critical mass where we're either going to move on and evolve and become something different, or we're going to screw it up again and we're going to blow up the world again. And, another, thousands of years from now, tens thousands of years, however long these iterations take, we'll eventually rediscover it and get it try again.
I've often wondered if the ancient story of Atlantis was like, just a very instinctive memory of something that probably existed in prehistory, and that they did the same mistakes that we're doing, and somebody hit the button. Yeah,
and it's very possible that, someone's finger is on that very button, as we speak, with everything that's going on in the world. It's just, I think we're kind of at that point, and I'm a big fan of the whole Mayan calendar, and I've watched a lot of things, and research on that, and that again, the Hollywood, those who control how we're supposed to think about it, they cast it in a doomsday, end of life, end of all life, apocalypse. But that's not how they meant it and how they wanted it to be looked at. It's this. Again, because we're taught that time is linear. It's A to B. It only goes in one direction. End of story. But we look at nature, even on the life on this planet, nothing is linear. Everything's cyclic. Everything goes in cycles.
Don't the Mayans? Didn't they have like a cycle that would renew about every 52 years?
They had a bunch of different cycles, and again, their mathematical system was very complex and it was cyclical. And the long count cycle, you hear people talk about the 13 Bakhtin cycle. It describes multiple layers, if you will, of these cycles. They had the cycles for the phases of the moon, the Earth going around the sun, for the 1 year. They also had the long count, the very high level long view that was broken. That was essentially amounts to our solar system is also orbiting the black hole at the center of our galaxy, just like our Earth goes around the sun. And what they were saying is that takes about 26,000 years. And every 5,000 years is kind of a subdivision of that. And certain things happen at certain points in this progression, the progression of the equinox. And again, that ties in with biblical things because, people talk like the Jesus fish, we're in the age of Pisces, and I'm not a real, biblical scholar or anything, but, what little I've looked up, Luke was very interesting to me. And, he says, upon entering the next kingdom, you will be greeted by a man bearing water. And the progression from, the progression of the equinox moves from Pisces to Aquarius, the water bears. I find it interesting because I'm an Aquarius, so I kind of fit with my own self-discovery.
I've noticed that most creative people or people who have humanitarian natures are Aquariuses.
Yeah, that's why, sometimes people think I'm a bit odd because I always ask certain questions. It's just like, well, you don't understand why I'm asking it. You know what I mean? Not that I'm smarter than anyone else or anything else. I just observe things differently, and I include some information that others don't. And I think that's part of what is leading our species astray is, like you said, we're consumed with Walmart and smartphones and sports and, the Coliseum, but we don't know how to grow our own food. We don't know how to cook our own meat, and we don't understand what we're doing here. Why are we here? Now, real quick, one thing I think is interesting too, like you said, kind of the Dark Ages and the Enlightenment periods, yes. There's no economical, in today's current paradigm, there's no job title where you get paid enough money to have a, quote, good standard of living, to be, a philosopher, a great thinker.
Because we're too busy running from Peter to pay Paul.
Absolutely, which is, of course, that's how they keep you controlled and keep you busy and entertained. They keep you busy, working, and then, after that, you're so stressed out, you're looking for a release. So you spend the rest of your time trying to unwind from being wound up all day, and you never get to the point where, what am I doing? Why am I here? These kind of philosophical questions. And one thing I think is interesting, with this whole economic downturn, the high unemployment, coupled with our technological era, there's a lot of people who are not in that rat race right now that are just kind of sitting around, and they have internet access and a computer and a smartphone everywhere they go, and they have time to just take a breath and be like, what am I doing? Just stop for a minute, what am I doing? Why do I do the things that I do? What's important to me?
Life no longer has any kind of, I wouldn't say spiritual guidance. It has no meaning. It's like all you are is what you do.
Absolutely. And again, you're kept in a box within that way of looking at it. If you look at our history again, I love history, like you do, and I always point out that it's always like this. You know what I mean? And revolutionary ideas are exactly that. They're revolutionary, right? A re-evolution. And the status quo, the power paradigm at any time is always diametrically opposed to these revolutionary ideas, and, respond against those ideas with great fervor because it reduces their ability to control what people are doing and their ability to benefit from that. When everyone thought the earth was flat and the church was the ruling power, and then some guy comes along and he's like, no, it's round. And it goes around the sun. I can prove it. Blasphemy, burn him. And so you have to look at that then. And, they always say, right, especially the central bankers, the U.S. government, the ones who control the way we're supposed to think. Oh, well, it's different this time. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. The earth isn't flat. The earth doesn't, the sun doesn't revolve around the earth. You can fly, you can break the sound barrier, you can fly in space. These are things, and that's why I always bring it back to, like, is someone empowering you or telling you no? Because if they're telling you no, then they have some other motive. Otherwise, why would they not say, well, that's an interesting idea. I don't know how the hell to do it, but let's look at it. The Wright brothers were like, you're telling me you can't fly, but
they were pilots. They owned a bicycle shop.
NASA was founded, by the father of modern rocketry and Werner von Braun, the German scientist, right? The Einsteins, the Oppenheimers, all these were German scientists that built the atom bomb. And, it's just, you follow it back and you look at the names of the people and where they came from, who they were. And, the more you just never stop questioning, the more you just keep going down this rabbit hole. And I tell people, I reject nothing offhand. It may not seem important now, but don't ignore it, because later on I might be like, oh, I'm glad I read that article about this thing, because now that I have all these other pieces, when you add that, there it is. Right?
Exactly.
The solution presents itself.
Exactly. It kind of makes me think of one of my favorite writers and a great futurist himself, H.G. Wells. He said that every age is the same. It's only fellowship that makes them endurable.
I like that.
I would have really liked, if I had a time machine, not to pun on him or anything, but if I had a time machine, I would like to go back in time and have lunch with that man once.
Yeah, again, that prophets of science fiction is great. You look at the Isaac Asimovs and the Wells, the Heinleins. A lot of these guys, they had very visionary ideas, and they were not per se overly accepted or respected in their time. But looking back, we can see, oh man, these guys, really onto something. That's what I'm getting at. It's always that way. The new easy ideas are always rejected initially because it doesn't make sense initially.
I actually believe that before a freshman congressman or a senator takes his seat of power, they should set him down and make him read George Orwell's Animal Farm. I mean, because there is no better example of how revolution is, the nature of revolution is, you do the overthrow, there's the corruption, and then there's another revolution to overthrow your revolution. And,
absolutely. But think about that, though. I mean, isn't that also a cycle?
It's a cycle. Actually, the American Revolution does stand out alone in current history as being the only revolution that did not collapse in on itself. And the only way that you could say it didn't collapse in on itself was the personality of George Washington. That man had timing. He knew what to do. And, of course, he was also a Grand Master in the Masonry of Alexandria, Virginia, too. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But
I think it definitely does. I think it definitely is a big, important piece of the puzzle there. If you ever... I believe it's also talked about again in Ancient Aliens, where they talk about the apotheosis of George Washington.
Mm-hmm.
That is there's a mural. Let me look it up real quick if I can spell it right. There it is. You can see where the fresco painted by Italian artist Constantino Brumidi in 1865 is visible in the dome of the rotunda. And it's here, I'll just post this. This is just a wiki thing of it. I'll post that in the chat real quick.
Is that the one that kind of makes him look like he's ascending up to heaven?
Yes, it is. And again, the more you kind of delve into some of these things, and here's where some people get weird with it. And but if you look at the posture that George Washington is in this picture,
he almost looks Christ-like.
He looks very Christ-like, but he also mirrors the depiction of Baphomet.
Yes, I've seen. There's also been statues that they said that are similar to that sitting poise that Baphomet does.
Right. So I mean, that's take all those little nuggets and see where those questions take you.
There's also the connection of the design of the city of Washington D.C. as a tribute to the goddess Venus.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so many just interesting things, I can, and most people who know me will tell you, do go on and on. But there's just so many interesting things that are not, spoon-fed to you. You have to just have an inquiring mind and to keep after things. And again, the universe is infinitely fascinating to me, and I think many things, we are all connected, in some form. And just want to throw this out there because I found this, a good example of this. On the way home, as I was driving, my wife and I stopped and she picked up some Chinese food. So she just handed me her fortune cookie from her meal this evening. And the fortune says, the important thing is to never stop questioning.
I like that. I like that.
I think that's, just one, small example of, the infinite universe functioning perfectly, and we're not always meant to understand it, but I think we were definitely meant to question it. And if we have no other purpose in this realm of existence, it is to try to understand what we are witnessing, and continue to ask and continue to look forward.
Yeah, and to mention a phrase that Carl Sagan said once to wrap all this up is that one of the personifications, or the one caricature that the human race has, is that we are an animal explorer. We have to know what's beyond the rim. It's the one thing that defines us from the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom, they don't care. They just care, like you said, they get out of bed and it's sustenance. Our sustenance beyond food and water is the fact that we have to know why.
Well, that gets with an interesting discussion on, the biology and all of that, which one of my favorite kind of discussions leads towards the discussion on consciousness. And it's been discovered kind of from, multiple angles of asking the question, from a computer science perspective of, how much information can we actually know and store and understand and all that, which again becomes kind of an infinite thing, right? It's like a hall of mirrors. You always, once you know something, you know that you know that. Then you know that you know that you know that, and that's infinite. And I think, also from the biological discussions, you look at kind of is the way our DNA and our brain and all that's configured, does that lead to consciousness? How does the biology create the consciousness? Or does it? Or maybe the consciousness is the source, and, our biology is able to pick up on this understanding, be in varying degrees of self-aware of our own consciousness. Because, even a flower is conscious of its surroundings because, as the sun moves across the sky, even the plants will, move their bodies to capture the most sunlight. So they're conscious of that. And, we're conscious of the fact that we're conscious, yes. And that can continue to go down that line.
And again, I get back to my favorite quote from my favorite writer is, all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream.
Absolutely, and I'll try to end here on another quote that I love too. We talked about the other day. Aldous Huxley. I'll need to just grab it real quick so I don't butcher it. To paraphrase, I can't find the exact. But basically, he said, when the doors of perception are cleansed, we will see the universe as it truly is, infinite.
Well, speaking of infinite, which we don't have, we have to wrap this up. But could you tell our listeners everything about your website and what you do, so that they can listen to your shows?
Absolutely. Our show is called Conspiracy Corner. It's on Wednesday nights every week from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's just blogtalkradio.com/Conspiracy Corner. And we're also on Facebook, Conspiracy Corner, Blog Talk Radio. Definitely join us there and keep up with and we put out a weekly reminder of 15 minutes for our show, and post different conspiracy related topics on that page. And there's all of our other shows are in archive on our Blog Talk Radio Conspiracy Corner page. And we welcome everyone to join us next week for our show and call in with their perspectives. We always like to get as much reach and as many different perspectives to what's going on, because to me we all are part of one consciousness, infinitely experiencing existence from a slightly different viewpoint.
Absolutely. And again, Wes, I would love to thank you. I like talking with you. I hope you would like to come back one time on Night Terrors, because this is like intellectual candy to me. I just love this talk. I would if you can, I invite you to come back, and I do thank you for showing up tonight.
Absolutely, and you're definitely welcome on our show anytime as well, and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you as well. Sorry Dave couldn't make it with us here tonight, but we'll definitely get him in the loop on a future your show or our show or whatever.
Okay.
That sounds good to me, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. In closing, I'd like to say that maybe it's just me, but as of late, I've heard a different agenda within the speeches of those that we elect. And I challenge each and every one of you to compare and contrast speeches that are written today with speeches written during, let's say, our grandfathers' or our grandparents' time. One can make an argument that times change and that people grow up. and rightly so. But if you listen to the keywords in the speeches, listen to what they are selling us. In our grandparents' time, the words were freedom, liberty, justice, and later came the word equality. Now, the speeches, it's fiscal, jobs, revenue, and taxes. All are points that are important to each and every one of us. I'll give every one of you that. But, my friends, when did our government turn into a corporation? Government is not there to bestow upon a few the profits of a lot. It is there to do the collective duty of preserving our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Now think about that. And in thinking about that, this is your humble host, Donald Allen Kirch, for Night Terrors, wishing all of you unpleasant dreams. Good night.